To the Right to Reason podcast. Today we will boldly go where no one has gone before. It's a science episode, and I'm so happy to say this, a Star Trek episode. If this isn't your cup of Earl Grey tea, hot, no problem, because in the future we'll be talking to Ari Stillman about Kafka and transgender rights, Ben Fama Jr. about why we believe that which we do believe, and we got a debate coming up very soon on free will. But today we're talking about the cosmos, the future. We're talking about Star Trek. We got a lot of questions about what's possible, what isn't. We've got an astrophysicist, Dr. Ethan Siegel, who's going to explain just that. This episode's going to Warp 9.
This is Ethan Siegel, author of Treknology, the science of Star Trek from tricorders to warp drives, and you have the right to reason.
All decks, this is the captain speaking. Evacuate the ship immediately. Get your designated shuttlecraft. Repeat, evacuate.
That's George's voice. What's happening?
We're delivering the shuttle. Go!
George.
You're okay, thank God. I have medical shuttle 37 standing by. Get to it now. Can you do that? Everything's gonna be okay. Do exactly as I say, shuttle 37.
George, it's coming. Our baby. It's coming now.
I'm on my way.
So are you telling me that some of this stuff from the Star Trek series is actually possible?
Some of it, most of it's already here or well on its way. There are only a few things that might be impossible. Everything else is just a matter of bringing our sci-fi dreams into reality.
Captain, shuttle 37 is my wife on board.
Yes, sir, she is.
I need you to go now. Do you hear me?
I'm waiting on you, sir.
No, just go. Take off immediately. That's an order.
Yes, sir.
No, wait. You can't go yet. Please stop. George, the shuttle's leaving. Where are you?
Sweetheart, listen to me. I'm not gonna be there.
No,
This is the only way you'll survive.
please stay on the ship. You have to be here.
The shuttles will never make it if I don't fight them off.
George, I can't do this without you.
Okay, I need you to push now.
I mean, our future, it often just looks so bleak. And I look at Star Trek and I think, you know, maybe there's a chance for technology improving the world. I mean, is that a possibility?
I mean, that's the whole ethics of Star Trek, is to say, let's not use technology for our own personal gains at the expense of everyone else. It's saying, no, let's use our deepest knowledge and understanding of the universe and what's possible to tackle society's greatest problems: war, famine, poverty, inequality, and instead build an altruistic future where our advances in science and technology are for the benefit of all of humanity.
What is it?
It's a boy.
A boy? Tell me about it.
He's beautiful. George, you should be here.
Impact alert.
What are we gonna call him?
We can name him after your father.
Tiberius? You kidding me? No, that's the worst. Let's name him after your dad. Let's call him Jim.
Jim. Okay. Jim it is.
Sweetheart, can you hear me? I love you so much. I love you.
You know, Ethan, it's just so hard to imagine that any of this could be possible. I mean, phasers and torpedoes and warp transporting down to planets and tractor beams. I mean, tractor beams?
Tractor beams, the technology to make it happen is already under development using photon beams, electric and magnetic fields, and pinpointing a single stable location and drawing it towards us. The prototypes are real. For a real full-scale technology and a real full-scale tractor beam that can even hold a ship in place and draw it in, it's up to us to make it so.
Ethan Siegel is a PhD astrophysicist, author, and science communicator who professes physics and astronomy at various colleges. He's won numerous awards for science writing since 2008 for his blog Starts With a Bang. That's the name of the blog, Starts With a Bang, including the award for Best Science Blog by the Institute of Physics. Fantastic. Wow. He's got 2 books out. Treknology, which we'll be talking about today. Treknology, the science of Star Trek from tricorders to warp drive and beyond the galaxy. How humanity looked beyond our Milky Way and discovered the entire universe. What a cool subtitle, dude. Both of those are available on Amazon. Ethan Siegel is available right now for the listener to hear about his ideas on Star Trek and whether or not all this shit's possible. Ethan, I'm so happy to have you here, man.
Well, thank you, Robert. It's my pleasure to be here. I am so excited for the opportunity to talk Star Trek, Treknology, and all of our sci-fi dreams that science is bringing to reality.
Yeah, I have a full-on erection right now. I'm a huge...
Prepare for rubbing speed!
I'm a huge Trekkie, and I'm a big science nerd, and I mean, I got to be the biggest Star Trek fan you've ever spoken to. I have to be somehow. I don't know. There's a lot of geeks out there, but somehow, I want to just jump right in. Is that okay? I mean, I have so many questions. I've read your book. It's fan-fucking-tastic, Ethan. I mean, fantastic. It is richly illustrated, and it just all the pictures and images and explanations, and to actually have a astrophysicist explaining this stuff, just mind-blowing, dude. I had no idea that so much was possible. I noticed that some things don't seem to be possible. Can you run through, if I recall, you had about 4 things in your book that you said, these things just ain't gonna happen, Jack.
5.
Get out!
3.
Get out of there! Get out!
1.
Well, so what I tried to do with every chapter in the book, with every one of the Treknologies that we looked at, and there are 28 of them that we looked at in the book, and you're right, I'll say 4 of them would at least need a breakthrough to become plausible. That with our current knowledge of physics and astrophysics, with the laws of nature and science that we know, 4 of them are going to give you some trouble. And those are warp drive.
No!
No! No!
Sorry, go ahead.
I know. Here's the whole thing. I'll do warp drive first, because with warp drive, there is a mathematical solution to relativity that says warp drive is possible. And that's great, right? If the mathematics says it's possible, then maybe it's really possible. This was discovered in the mid-1990s by theoretical astrophysicist Miguel Alcubierre. He engineered what we now call the Alcubierre spacetime, and he showed if you build a warp bubble around your ship, then you can travel forward with that bubble around you. In the forward direction, space gets compressed. So then you travel through this compressed space, and you can get to your destination in a much shorter amount of time because you travel a much shorter distance than you otherwise would. And that's pretty fantastic. But there's a problem. In order to do this, you need the space behind you to rarefy. That's the opposite of compress. You need it to expand by an equal and opposite amount. And the only way you can get that compression and that rarefaction of space is if you don't just have positive mass and energy, but a form of negative mass and energy. Now, we don't know whether we have that in our universe or not. If we do, warp drive is possible. If we don't, it isn't. But that's why warp drive might not be possible just yet. The other ones, I'll say that from my point of view, artificial gravity is problematic because it needs the same big advance. Transporters are problematic because I don't doubt that you can read in all the quantum information about anything, read it in, recreate it somewhere else, you know, print out all the atoms, have it be an exact replica of what you started with. But is it still you? Those of you who've used computers for a while would say, hey, I know that I don't care about the difference between Control X, Control V, and Control C, delete, Control V. At the end, I've just taken my file and moved it to another location and all the bits are the same. But if that initial copy of you is you, a human being, a living person with a mind and an existence, and that you can identify as you, I bet you really care whether you get cut and pasted somewhere else or whether you get copied, deleted, and then a copy of you gets pasted somewhere else. Until we do that, I'm a little skeptical of transporters, at least of putting animate objects through my transporter.
Okay.
And the last one that's maybe impossible...
Before you go to the last one, I hate to interrupt you, man, but you're blowing my mind right now. So you're telling me Captain Kirk steps onto the transporter. He says, beam me down to the planet. I'm going to bang some weird green alien girl, or I'm going to fight some bad guy with lots of heads or something. He's about to beam down to the planet. They push the button. You're telling me they kill Shatner every goddamn time, and then a new Shatner appears on the planet that's not the same Shatner?
Well, how else would you explain the transporter accident that created Kirk and a duplicate Kirk? Or the transporter accident that created Will Riker and his identical copy of himself, Thomas Riker.
I remember that one. He was like a boring version of Riker.
You know, it's funny if you follow him through.
But he was better with Troy. Remember, like he was like a stud with Troy. Troy was like, oh, this guy's he's a nice guy. Or
well, there was
like a career-driven guy. You know.
I think it's really funny that you think that Thomas Riker is the boring version, because I think Thomas Riker is the chance-taking version of Will Riker that the more conservative first officer of the Enterprise actually never was. That's the whole reason that Troy had the issues she had with Will, is because he was kind of non-committal and waffly and didn't seize opportunities when they came his way. And Thomas Riker had never had those issues. He was like, no, like I did everything that showed up my way. I just got stranded on this planet for 9 years while some copy of me was off becoming first officer.
You know what I think it is? I think maybe we're both wrong. New idea here, okay? Deanna was just into novelty. She just liked something new. That's why she hooked up with Worf in that one weird episode, which would have been that would have been an awesome couple, I think. Worf and Deanna.
That is how the Klingon lures a mate.
Tough little ship.
Little.
Wrong, number one. It's almost the longest. Too cocky, as it turned out.
Humans sometimes find it helpful to have an outsider set the standard by which they're judged.
The growth rate's almost down to 0.
It's as solid as it'll go, Commander.
No!
Our power systems are failing.
Have your sensors indicated any problem down there, Lieutenant?
None. How shall I live down this humiliation?
Well, it happens.
A nervous reaction to an impending event of great importance.
Your advanced technology has proven inadequate?
It's a horrible thing to say to a man.
His weakness disgusts me. I hate it.
It can't be activated and deactivated simply.
I can't even figure out what's keeping it alive.
I will not be able to come this evening.
That is because you haven't been properly stimulated yet.
So I'll tell you, I don't know if you've ever, as the ultimate Star Trek fan, I don't know if you've ever gone in August to the biggest Star Trek convention in the whole country, Star Trek Las Vegas.
No.
But at Star Trek Las Vegas, they do this. I went last year for my very first time, and it was a ball because the crew and cast of pretty much every show that's still around, they all show up and they all talk about behind the scenes stuff that you might want to know. And Deanna, when she hooked up with Worf in that episode, the actress Marina Sirtis talks about Could we at least get him to take his nasty, disgusting Klingon teeth out before we kiss? Do they not have dentists on Klingon on Kronos in the 24th century?
They do. They just kill them every time they screw up. That's the problem. Okay, so we got two more, right? We got two more.
The last one. No, we did transporters. We did artificial gravity. We did warp drive.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
And the last one is subspace communication, and that to me is going to be the hardest one, because as far as we know, there's no such thing as subspace. Only the regular kind of space. But if you're willing to, and one of the things I talk about in the book is every technology has this technology the way Star Trek envisioned it. And those are really interesting, but I always like to look at, you know what? These are science fiction writers, and they're writing to tell a story. Let's look instead at what the real-life science tells you and how this same effect could be possible. So would it be possible to communicate faster than light, even if it doesn't involve going through subspace? And so in the book I talk about ways that maybe you can make that possible that just don't involve subspace communication.
Okay. So now that we have totally just destroyed every Trekkie's fantasy about those four topics.
I've heard you. And I wish to go on hurting you.
What can we accomplish? Like, I wanted to ask you about cloaking devices, phasers. The holodeck was always one of my favorite ideas. Maybe like androids that have artificial intelligence, replicators, stuff like that. Like, what's some stuff that maybe we can do in the future?
Well, all of those I think are plausible, and some of them are a lot closer to reality than you might actually know. And that was one of the real joys I had researching for this book, was discovering how many of these pie-in-the-sky technologies were actually well on their way. For example, when you talk about the holodeck, I think that was the one you got most excited about. When you talk about the holodeck, like, who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want to be able to act out or engage in any sort of action or fantasy or simulated experience that you wanted without having any consequences? Some people can act out a fantasy of killing other people. The military can use this for training simulations of dangerous situations. You can, look to Quarks at Deep Space Nine and his holosuites for an example of what sordid fantasies you might act out in your own depraved imagination.
Last time we did that, I was sore for a week.
Elevate the legs and try to keep her warm.
We will have about 15 seconds of useful consciousness, then about 10 seconds of extreme disorientation, then we pass out.
Is penetration possible?
I don't know just yet. It may be an option.
But what I thought was remarkable is, like, when people were telling me, we have virtual reality and that's pretty much the same thing. And I was like, are you kidding me? You think virtual reality is the same thing as that? Well, I was very skeptical of that until I heard about a simulation they did in Tokyo earlier this decade. You would put on a pair of VR goggles and a headset, and you would hear the sound of water drops falling. And as you looked around, you would see in 3 dimensions drops of water appeared to be falling. So these were drops falling vertically, and they would appear, like it was along a screen, but they would be closer or farther away. And you could literally run after them with your hand outstretched. Now, here's the thing that really makes it exciting to me, is they had all of these infrasound sensors set up around the room to detect where in 3D space your hand was. If you got your hand directly under a drop of water so that water drop fell into your hand, you would see a splash of that water drop on your hand through your headset. You would hear the splashing sound, but those same infrasound sensors actually emitted a pressure wave pulse that would strike the palm of your hand and make you feel that splashing sensation of water in your hand. And according to people who were at that simulation, it felt wet. you could actually simulate the sensation of wetness.
And this is happening like now. We can do this now.
I believe, I'm hesitant to give you a day because I don't think I remember exactly, but I think this was already 7 years ago. I think this was 2011 that they did that simulation. So this is the kind of thing that just blows my mind when I'm learning about the different types of technology that are already here. You start pumping in smells, olfactory stimulation. You start hooking up sensors that can make you feel hunger or pressure on different parts of your body, and all of a sudden, like, this is as real as it gets. That's real close to a real life holodeck, and that's just amazing to me.
Okay, phasers. Can we shoot stuff with phasers?
You know, when I first started talking to people about phasers, when I first started looking at this, they started telling me what I thought was the most disappointing thing of, well, we have tasers and stun guns, and I was like, oh yeah, that's really the same thing. I got my little rinky-dink taser that I push the trigger and 2 little electrical leads fly out and strike someone, and then we run electricity through them, and you're telling me that's a phaser? No, thank you. I want to hit something remotely with a pulse of light and stun it. That's what I want to be able to do. Maybe if I turned it up, I could vaporize it, but that's what I want. That's what I want for my phaser. And I was like, okay, well, how can we do this? And I learned that actually this is something that the military has developed a prototype for. I don't know if I can give you all the information about it because, you know, apparently, like everything in the military, people are on a need-to-know basis, and there's a whole lot that they've deemed I don't need to know. But there are a lot of things I was able to find out. And one of them is they have a large, it has to be tank-mounted weapon at this point, or vehicle-mounted weapon, that acts just like a phaser does. It's a 2-phased pulse. Let me tell you about this first phase. So they can target anything, pinpoint accuracy, about 2 kilometers away. So over a mile away, you can pick out your target, and it's just like, you know, you would think like laser sniper thing. It is literally just a laser. So if you can target something well enough at that distance, you can hit it with a phaser. The way it works is that first pulse is an ultraviolet light pulse. Ultraviolet light is shorter wavelength and higher energy than the light that we can visibly see. So what it can do is it can ionize atoms and molecules. Everything's made out of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and what ultraviolet light can do is it can kick these electrons off of the atoms and molecules that are on the surface. So if I fired this at your chest, I would ionize some of the molecules on your shirt, and that would create a small amount of ionized plasma. Now this gets hot, but it's not hot enough to burn you. The big important thing it does is it creates a slew of free electrons in a specific location right at the surface of your body. The second pulse is infrared light. This is also invisible, but it's longer wavelength. It's lower in energy per photon, but this is going to be a real high intensity pulse. So it carries a lot of energy. The thing about infrared light, when it strikes a plasma, is the plasma absorbs all of that energy really fast. And when something absorbs energy really fast, it heats up and expands, and that causes the plasma to explode. If they tune this right, they can create a non-lethal concussive explosion that will knock a target off its feet, knock them out potentially, but it doesn't carry the risk of lethal force like even rubber bullets do. So this, and the fact that it can operate from so far away at the speed of light, tells me that this phaser is well on its way. Imagine the good this could do for law enforcement if all of a sudden they could disable a target at a tremendous distance without having any risk of using, lethal force.
I'm glad you said 2 kilometers is a mile, because I was guessing about 8 ounces. So that That helped me out. Okay, so I'm a big food guy, all right? I love my food, and the whole concept of how they can just go over to the computer and say to the console, make me a sundae, or make me a hot dog, or whatever. Replicators. Is that something maybe will I be able to create a slice of pizza in the future?
A lot of people were like, we don't have replicators that work the way Star Trek says they do. And I'm like, that's true, but we do have 3D printers. You normally think of 3D printers as like, oh yeah, I put like my plastic feedstock in there and I can make any like plastic object out of it. And that's pretty cool, but it's not the same. Except it's not just for plastic. You can put wood pulp in as your feedstock, and you can actually make 3D printed objects out of wood. You can put metal in there, like titanium, and make a 3D sculpture or part out of titanium. What they've also decided that they can do is they can use 3D printers, and they can use different foods as feedstock. So if you're Deanna Troi, you can put chocolate in your 3D printer and 3D print whatever intricate chocolate sculptures you want. If you put in, and this is amazing, pizza dough and marinara sauce and cheese and whatever liquefied toppings you want, you can 3D print your own pizza. You can 3D print your own cooked pizza because the 3D printing process is done at a heated temperature. And you would ask me for pizza, and I would tell you that on the International Space Station, they've not only 3D printed exactly a pizza, they've done it in the zero-gravity environment of space. So you might say, well, I can't really order my Earl Grey tea just yet from the replicator, and that's true, Captain Picard. You can't quite do that, but pizza in space is already a reality.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Mr. Spock, are you all right?
Yes, I believe no permanent damage was done.
What happened?
The occipital area of my head seems to have impacted with the arm of the chair.
No, Mr. Spock. I meant, what happened to us?
Okay, so lots of times they'll be fighting the Romulans, right? And, bang, 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 everybody's shooting phasers and torpedoes back and forth. I kind of want to ask you about photon torpedoes, but we'll get to that. Okay, so they're doing all this fighting and stuff, and then all of a sudden the Romulans just disappear.
Oh, the good old cloaking device.
Yeah, is that something that maybe we could pull off?
This is really incredible because the cloaking device is one of the technologies that's developing the fastest right now.
On screen.
Greetings, Captain. I regret to inform you that Gowron and the High Council are quite busy and won't be able to speak with you today.
Is Gowron aware that we have been transmitting messages for the past 3 days?
Captain, Gowron wishes it were possible to talk with everyone who wants an audience, but he is one man. The demands on his time are formidable. If you would like me to take him a message.
A message? Very well. Tell Gowron, leader of the High Council of the Klingon Empire, that his arbiter of succession, Jean-Luc Picard, needs a favor.
A favor?
I require a cloaked vessel.
A cloaked vessel? This is no small favor, Captain.
It is for a mission that could have repercussions throughout the quadrant.
How would it benefit the Klingon Empire? I'm sure Gowron will ask.
The only benefit to the Klingon Empire would be our gratitude.
That is what you want me to tell him?
Yes. And please add that if he is unable to provide us with a ship, then I am sure there are others in the Klingon Empire who would be willing to help me. And then they would have our gratitude.
I see.
Also, please tell Gowron that I am immensely gratified that he is prospering so well. A tribute to his skilled leadership.
cloaking devices appear to work just fantastically. They're not fully over the full suite of wavelengths of visible light that we want, but there is a type of material out there called metamaterials. And what they do is, if you were to coat yourself in a metamaterial, what would happen is light coming from behind you would bend around you and then continue forward in the same direction that it started. So if someone was far away from you, they would see right through you, because the light that would be coming to their eyes would be bent around you and would continue on as though you weren't there. It's only when you move or when you get very close to an object that you can tell it's there at all. So today's cloaking devices look a little bit more like Predator from Predator than they do like the Romulans from Star Trek, but that's still really good. That's still really good. And what's happening as we move forward in time is they are adding more and more layers to these metamaterials, which means you need to get closer and closer to detect that they're there. And you also can cover larger and larger portions of the electromagnetic spectrum. So you not only become invisible to a few wavelengths of light, but all sorts of ways you would be detected. So you can become invisible not just to someone's eyes, but to radar and radio signals and all sorts of windows in the electromagnetic spectrum. So these advances in metamaterials, which is a type of material science, this is bringing real-life cloaking devices into our world.
Data, right? The android. But he's not just like just a random robot. Like, he has artificial intelligence, right? So this whole thing scares the crap out of me. Because on one end, I love me some Data, you know. He even got to bang Tasha Yar that one time. How cool was that, right? We're all proud of him.
I'm an android. Lieutenant Commander Data.
From you, Data, you are fully functional, aren't you?
Of course, but...
How fully?
In every way, of course. I am programmed in multiple techniques. A broad variety of pleasuring.
Oh, you jewel. That's exactly what I hoped.
But why wouldn't artificial intelligence kill us? You know, that's a fear of mine, like a Terminator kind of thing. But at the same time, is this something we can even make?
And have you noticed how your boobs have started to firm up? Not that we care about such things in this day and age. Uh-huh. Thank you, Data.
I have an odd craving for the blood of a live kolar beast. This environment must be affecting me again.
And have you noticed how your boobs have started to firm up?
I would say the people leading the way on this are Japan. In Japan, they are absolutely leading the way on this. What is it to you that makes Data interesting? Is it his body? Because we've got pretty good bodies that are, you know, I'll say the faces are still a little bit in the uncanny valley, which if you don't know what that is, it's when you make something that looks more and more human-like, you reach a point where you can tell it's kind of like a human, but a face that's kind of human-like, but identifiably not human, looks weirder to us than something where you're like, oh, that's a robot face. So Rosie from the Jetsons, not in the uncanny valley, she's clearly a robot. Something like Data, he's human enough because it's played by a human actor, human enough that you'll say this made it, this passes for human. But something in between that, let's see, like those animated characters from the Polar Express movie, that falls into the uncanny valley where you look at it and you're like, that is weird. Those are
it kind of creeps you out a little bit, especially if it wasn't like a cartoon or something. If you were looking right at it, it would almost it would almost cause like a sense of fear in you. Right?
It's more like a sense of disgust. It's more like a sense of like, ugh, this is not right. Like George Herbert Walker Bush eating broccoli. It's just that big sense of disgust. like, oh, I'm not doing this anymore. So you don't want your robot to look like that. But what they're doing is they're putting more and more and more, motion points in the faces of these robots, and they're becoming better at that. But at the same time, they have speech synthesis. They have quality artificial intelligence. The same technologies that are now antiquated in something like Siri allow something to do natural language processing, compute what the response is, and talk back to you in real time in your native language. And that's something that's, I think, at the heart of what we think of as an android or artificial intelligence is, does it have the mind to deliver to us the information that we want? Can it converse with us in real time? Can it convince us that it is a human-like being in terms of intelligence and ability to communicate with us? And I think we're really getting there, that is something that's at the very least on its way to fruition.
I'm Captain Janeway. This is Lieutenant Tuvok.
We are aware of your designations.
What's your designation?
7 of 9, tertiary adjunct of Unimatrix 01. But you may call me 7 of 9.
I want to ask you about your favorite Star Trek moments, but there was something that kind of just came up organically while we were talking. Photon torpedoes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, photon torpedoes, I love them. I think this is fantastic.
Fire. To be or not to be.
Because this is a technology that, I thought, this is awesome. Like, I remember there was an episode where a culture had infiltrated the bridge of Star Trek, of the Enterprise, and they were like 100 years behind technologically, and so they were trying to use the Enterprise to fight their war, and their big enemy station would fall if it got hit by one photon torpedo.
Oh, for a minute I didn't know what you were talking. I remember that one, yeah. Like they kind of tricked them all into thinking that they had to fight these alleged bad guys, but they weren't really a threat to the Federation.
They were like these two warring like little tribes, and they had this super backwards technology where they're like using they're using like plasma rifles to try and shoot the Enterprise, and
but ironically somehow they could totally take over the flagship of the Federation with ease.
Right.
But anyway,
right.
But one photon torpedo would have just devastated the other.
The way a photon torpedo works is it's about a coffin-size object, and we know it's coffin-size because you remember they buried Spock in one at the end of Wrath of Khan.
Jim, I think you'd better get down here.
Bones?
Better. Hurry.
Savick, take the comm.
I don't want to talk about that, Ethan. I'm still...
Spoiler alert. Sorry, spoiler alert. Wrath of Khan.
I'm still a little wrong.
For anyone who hasn't yet seen the original Wrath of Khan, I'm sorry, spoiler alert.
No! You'll flood the whole compartment to die. He's dead already.
So what happens is you fill half of your photon torpedo with matter. You fill the other half with antimatter. And then there's a divider between them.
Spock! Ship. Out of danger?
Yes.
Don't grieve, Admiral. It is logical. The needs of the many outweigh
the needs of the few.
Or the one. I have been, and always shall be, your friend. Live long and prosper.
And then when your photon torpedo reaches the right point in space, on its destination, you remove the barrier separating the matter and antimatter. You have matter-antimatter annihilation, and through Einstein's E equals mc squared, 100% of the mass of both matter and antimatter gets converted into pure energy. I estimate that if you take about 10,000 photon torpedoes and fire them all at once, it would be energetic enough to blow up an entire planet.
We are assembled here today to pay final respects to our honored dead. And yet it should be noted that in the midst of our sorrow, this death takes place in the shadow of new life, the sunrise of a new world, a world that our beloved comrade gave his life to protect and nourish. He did not feel this sacrifice a vain or empty one, and we will not debate his profound wisdom at these proceedings. Of my friend, I can only say this. Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human. Others? Up.
Before we move on to your favorite Star Trek moments, okay, what the hell is antimatter? I don't understand that. And here, I'm so glad I have an astrophysicist to ask.
So here's the thing. Antimatter is, it's a counterpart to normal matter. So we know protons, neutrons, and electrons is what all of our bodies and matter is made out of. Well, electrons are fundamental particles. Protons and neutrons are composite particles made out of 3 quarks each. So quarks are one type of fundamental particle called, they're part of a family called fermions. And the other type of fermions are leptons, which include electrons and their heavier cousins and all the neutrinos. So that's matter. All of those, the quarks and the leptons, are matter. Well, there are also anti-quarks and anti-leptons, and those are antimatter. These have the same masses as the matter particles, but opposite charges, opposite spins, and when you collide a matter particle with its antimatter counterpart, they annihilate away to pure energy. We can also take the opposite route, and we can collide particles together with high enough energy that we can spontaneously produce pairs of matter and antimatter. So when you say, oh, antimatter is out there, what we're basically saying is we can create not only particles, but for every particle we make, we create these antiparticle counterparts. And that's what we want to use. So antimatter containment is a Treknology I talk about, because one of the things we've done, this is at the Alpha experiment, which runs alongside CERN at the Large Hadron Collider, is they will make antiprotons and anti-electrons, which we call positrons, and they will slow them down and bind them together to make neutral anti-hydrogen. This is the first place on Earth where we have made anti-atoms. Now, if you can make anti-atoms, you can do all sorts of things with them. We have probed their spectral lines and found that they have the same spectral lines that hydrogen atoms do. We have probed, can you confine them? And we've actually stored these anti-atoms for up to 20 minutes, which is really impressive if you consider that even if a single electron or single proton collides with this anti-atom, it annihilates away. So if we can store neutral antimatter for long, indefinite periods of time, we could make a photon torpedo. What's also incredible about this, I know I said artificial gravity was impossible and warp drive was impossible unless you have negative mass. We've never measured which way antimatter falls in a gravitational field. If it falls down, like normal matter does and like we expect antimatter does, then what we'll say is, oh yeah, if it falls down, then it's just like normal matter. It has positive mass, and we still have a dead end to warp drive and artificial gravity. But if it goes the other way, if an anti-atom were, instead of down at 9.8 meters per second squared, would accelerate up at 9.8 meters per second squared in Earth's gravitational field, then all of a sudden these technologies become possible, and it's just a question of engineering them.
Oh my god, I'm so happy right now. Like, this is like my favorite episode ever of the Right to Reason podcast. I'm so happy. Okay, all right. Speaking of favorite episodes, I gotta calm down. All right, I got a show to do. I gotta host this. Okay, what's your? I'm a big Trouble with Tribbles fan, of course. I know that's cliche, but I loved it. But what's your favorite out of all the Star Treks? I mean, DS9, Voyager, TNG, original series, whatever. Even the movies. Like, what's your favorite? And then after that, if you don't mind, let everybody know how they can find your books, your blog. You're on Forbes magazine, aren't you? I mean, you're all over the place, man. Just let everybody know how.
All
they can
right,
find
we'll
you.
go one at a time. First off, my favorite episode of any Star Trek series. If I had to pick one, I think my favorite episode was the Next Generation episode called The Measure of a Man, where they put Data on trial for his humanity, to see if Data has the autonomous right to determine whether he stays on the Enterprise or whether he goes with a scientist for labs and experimental work where they want to deactivate him, take him apart, and attempt to reverse engineer him. If Data is just property, if he's just an object, then he does not have the rights and the autonomy to determine what will happen to him. But if he does, then that's really the border we have between when does artificial intelligence get its own rights? When do robots have rights? And I thought this is such an important question because it really speaks to the heart of what is artificial life. When can we say something is alive artificially? And it's like a courtroom battle where Riker has to be on one side and Picard has to be on the other, and they both give really good arguments, and there's not a good resolution.
Major papers.
Yes. Suffice it to say he's an expert. Commander, is your contention that Lieutenant Commander Data is not a sentient being and therefore not entitled to all the rights reserved for all life forms within this Federation?
Data is not sentient, no.
Commander, would you enlighten us? What is required for sentience?
Intelligence, self-awareness, consciousness.
Prove to the court that I am sentient.
This is absurd. We all know you're sentient.
So I am sentient, but Commander Data is not.
That's right.
Why? Why am I sentient?
Well, you are self-aware.
That's the second of your criteria. Let's deal with the first, intelligence. Is Commander Data intelligent?
Yes. It has the ability to learn and understand and to cope with new situations.
Like this hearing?
Yes.
What about self-awareness? What does that mean? Why am I self-aware?
Because you are conscious of your existence and actions. You are aware of yourself and your own ego.
Commander Data, what are you doing now?
I'm taking part in a legal hearing to determine my rights and status. Am I a person or property?
And what's at stake?
My right to choose. Perhaps my very life.
My rights. My status. My right to choose. My life. Oh, seems reasonably self-aware to me, Commander. I'm waiting.
This is exceedingly difficult.
Do you like Commander Data?
I don't know it well enough to like or dislike it.
But you admire him.
Oh, yes. It is an extraordinary piece
of engineering and programming. Yes, you have said that. Commander, you have devoted your life to the study of cybernetics in general.
Yes.
And Commander Data in particular.
Yes.
And now you propose to dismantle him.
So that I can learn from it and construct more.
How many more?
As many as are needed. Hundreds, thousands if necessary. There is no limit.
A single Data, and forgive me, Commander, is a curiosity.
a wonder even, but thousands of datas. Isn't that becoming a race? And won't we be judged by how we treat that race? Now tell me, Commander, what is data? I don't understand.
What is he? A machine. Is he? Are you sure? Yes. You see, he's met 2 of your 3 criteria for sentience, so what if he meets the 3rd? Consciousness in even the smallest degree. What is he then? I don't know. Do you?
Do you? Do you? Well, that's the question you have to answer. Your Honor, a courtroom is a crucible. In it we burn away irrelevancies until we are left with a pure product, the truth, for all time. Now, sooner or later, this man, or others like him, will succeed in replicating Commander Data. Now, the decision you reach here today will determine how we will regard this creation of our genius. It will reveal the kind of a people we are, what he is destined to be. It will reach far beyond this courtroom and this one android. It could significantly redefine the boundaries of personal liberty and freedom, expanding them for some, savagely curtailing them for others. Are you prepared to condemn him and all who come after him to servitude and slavery? Your Honor, Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, there it sits.
Of all the things that Star Trek does, one of my favorite things that it does that makes it unique out of all the science fiction out there, certainly of all the science fiction that ever came before it, is it doesn't just talk about technology, is it uses this futuristic setting and these futuristic technologies as a lens to view our own ethical dilemmas and conundrums through, where we can start asking about these deep questions about what's right and wrong as far as humanity is concerned, and a deep question as to where does life begin? When will we have created non-human life? When will we have created artificial life? That's such a big question that I really loved that episode. And when Riker turns Data off, you think you have the answer, but Picard's counter-argument is even better. So I thought that was really my favorite episode. You know, I think when it comes to Star Trek, we look at the technologies and we think how great this is, but we don't stop and think about what are the ethical ramifications of these technologies. For example, with Geordi's visor, you know, we've worked really hard on developing that, and we have chips we can implant in people's brains now, right into their visual cortex, to wirelessly send visual signals to them. We could restore sight to the blind. Who wouldn't want to do that? Well, at the same time, imagine if you've restored sight to someone who's blind and some nefarious agent comes along and wirelessly sends incorrect visual signals to their brain. We can't even protect our bank passwords from hackers or our Yahoo passwords from Yahoo. So what are we going to do when you can't even protect your own mind from computer hackers? Is that a technology we should be spreading out throughout, you know, humanity? Or is that something we should look at and say, ooh, actually, this is really rough. This is really something where we need better security before we can do that. And so those types of ethical questions are really what's at the heart of Star Trek to me. And the episode The Measure of a Man is probably my favorite for that one.
So you're a philosopher. I had no idea.
Oh,
here I'm
nerding
out because I got a scientist on here, and I didn't know you were a moral ethics kind of philosopher dude at heart. That's so cool.
I think we all need to think about right and wrong. You know, this is not the days of the Manhattan Project and Oppenheimer anymore, where scientists just do the science and it's up to the rest of the world to determine who's good and who's evil. You need to seriously take a look at the ethics of what you're doing and what the broader implications of it are before you go down that road. Just because someone can do it doesn't mean they should. And that's something that I think is on all of us to keep in mind as we not only pursue our scientific and technological ends, but as we go through all of our lives. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so if you're looking for me and where you can find me, My blog is Starts With a Bang. I've been writing it for more than 10 years now. It's currently located on Forbes at forbes.com/sites/startswithabang. And you can follow me. I'm at Starts With a Bang on Twitter. I'm Starts With a Bang on Tumblr. And I'm the Starts With a Bang page on Facebook. So go ahead and look for me wherever you are. And you can also subscribe to the Starts With a Bang podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes.
Ethan Siegel, PhD, you are the coolest dude I have ever met. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate your hyperbole. It makes me sound really good.
Siegel, PhD, everybody, author of Treknology and Beyond the Galaxy. Check him out at Forbes.com. Next week, we're going to be talking to Ari Stillman about Kafka and transgender rights. I want to remind you all that you can support us at patreon.com/right and learn more at therighttoreason.com. Thank you for joining me in this special Star Trek episode. Don't forget two things today: to boldly go where no one has ever gone before, and that you have the right to reason. And what about your books? Because I've read one, amazing. I want to check out the other one. How can we find more?
I would say the fastest place to get them, although there are brick and mortar stores that carry them, like your local independent bookstores and Barnes and Noble. You can always get them on Amazon. My second book is Treknology, The Science of Star Trek from Tricorders to Warp Drives. For those of you who are astronomy fans and want to know the story of what the universe is and how we figured it out, with lots of pictures and no equations, you can check out Beyond the Galaxy, how humanity looked beyond our Milky Way and discovered the entire universe. And for those of you who can't wait for more books that are coming out, take a look next year, because I'm currently writing a book right now that's tentatively titled Before the Big Bang, and you definitely won't want to miss that one.
Oh my God. Can we have you back on to talk about Before the Big Bang?
I'm writing chapter 4 right now, so absolutely. Yes. You know, one of the things I'm most excited about is next winter, I'm going to be leading an astro tour of Iceland. We're going to spend 6 days touring around Iceland, seeing glaciers, volcanoes, lagoons, all the natural wonders of this far north country. And at night, we're going to be getting 16 hours of darkness. We're going to be looking at the winter skies. We're going to be hunting for aurorae. And on January 21st, 2019, we're going to see a total lunar eclipse and be treated to sunrise just as it ends. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime trip. I'll be leading it, and you can sign up. There are still a few spots open at astrotours.co/startswithabang.
Dude, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Space. The final frontier. These are the continuing voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Their ongoing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life forms and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone.